And now, from God's Unchanging Word Studios in New Orleans, we are pleased to bring you news, nuggets, and insights with today's host, Tom Carey.
Well, greetings, everyone, and welcome to God's Unchanging Word, another edition for our news, nuggets, and insights for this week. And today is Friday, October 19th, 2018. A lot of conditions going on around the world. We're just going to do the best we can at covering as much as we can on some of the most important events that focus on biblical end time in your life. So let's get right into it. Let's talk about first media lost. And we're going to center most of our program around the media concept of what's going on around the world, because you're going to see some very significant end time scenarios beginning to build into the mind of people that's going to be a calamity for God's people at the end. All right, so now, propaganda. Talking about media as a weapon, and then we're going to talk about lying witnesses. Last week we talked about you're not supposed to hear an accusation against anyone without two witnesses. But what happens now when the media changes and they let one witness be the person who makes the accusations and everyone believes it? The Bible talks about lying witnesses, and we're going to conclude our program today with that segment in Biblical Nuggets. But first, let's remember all those who are in the Florida Panhandle. The events that's been taking place in weather and the climate that continues to grow around the world is just devastating everyone. Now, you notice what I just said there? And the climate, because that's what you hear. You hear that every place that you turn. Climate change, climate change. So we're going to talk more about that as we go forward in the months ahead, because you're going to hear more and more of that, how that's going to be that hammer that's going to continue to drive a nail on God's people toward the end time. So the Bible talks about staying in touch with the brethren. Malachi 3:16 said, "They who feared the Lord spoke often one to another." And you have called, and many have asked, is there anybody who needs help of the brethren in the Panhandle? And at this particular junction, I'm happy to say that all of God's people that we know of are doing fine. I've gotten pictures from people with fallen trees around them, even as far as Virginia, believe it or not. Wilmington, Virginia, where trees have fallen down. We got a couple of pictures came in. I just wasn't able to put them in. But please, keep everyone in your prayers, because these people have a long way to go before they're going to be back to recovery. As of this morning, even in Texas now, they're having flooding in the major river, northwest, I believe it is, of Austin. I can't remember exactly where it's at, but it's almost like 20-foot rise in this river overnight. So everywhere you look, there seems to be problems with weather taking place, and that's not going to get much better as things go on down the road. So we're going to keep in touch with that as we go, but we want to do a little research and bring it to the biblical portions of what's taking place, what God actually says. So now, how about this one? Marijuana growers. That ought to get everybody's attention. I just got this in the mail just this morning. Marijuana growers, this is from the Canadian cannabis companies, had a combined market cap this year. You ready for that? $55.84 billion. That's growing marijuana. I mean, what a change from sneaking it in across the borders to now it's become a legal substance where the government can get their taxes. But that's not what I want to show you. I want to show you this. It's an all-time new high in just 1 year. Amazingly, exactly 1 year ago, on October 16, 2017, the combined market cap of the Canadian cannabis companies was only $9.72 billion. Take a look at that. From 9.72 to $55 billion in 1 year. That's absolutely astonishing when you think about that. Now, that's just Canada. That's not even talking about the United States and everywhere it's going. That is continuing to grow. So here's what I want to bring out about this. 2 Timothy 3, 1-3 says this, and I'm just pulling out pieces because you should know these scriptures. It says, "But know this, in the last days perilous times will come, for men will be lovers of themselves and lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God." So I know that there's a lot of people say that this is a miracle drug and people are taking it for the medical condition. But I'm having a hard time believing in 1 year that the medical conditions grew from 9.7 billion to $55 billion in 1 year. So in other words, what we have done is just like with the alcohol, we have just now basically legalized it for everybody, and it's going to run rampant, and many people's lives are going to be wrecked as a result. So I wanted to bring that to your attention because these kinds of conditions are going to get worse and worse and worse. With the people who drive, it's really hard to tell what's going on with all that. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention to make you aware of the overall climate and the mindset of people as we get closer and closer toward end times. It was in 1972, I just want to reminisce on a story here. I just came into the church in 1971 in December. In 1972, the Worldwide Church of God was having a campaign right here in New Orleans with Garner Ted Armstrong. And I remember that well. They had these huge banners and billboards all over the city. And they gave us 11 by 17 posters, and we went down some of the main thoroughfares and asking businesses, can we put this in your window for the campaign? When the campaign finally came, there was over 2,500 people at one of the main auditoriums uptown who actually came out to see this 3-night campaign. There was one of the nights, Garner Ted got up there and he says, now I'm going to tell everybody in the audience how to get rich. At 20 years old, I said, oh, what? You got my attention. I want to see how I'm going to get rich. Well, he went through this incredible, mesmerizing message about the end time, the warning, and everything that's coming on, and God's people. And then he got toward the end, and he goes, and that's how you're going to get rich. And I'm looking around and say, I missed it. What did he say? I looked from physical eyes about how I'm going to get rich. And then he went on to say this. He says, as the end time approaches, the things will get worse and worse and worse. So if you want to be on the edge of becoming rich, be on the edge of the decline in the morality and all the structure of a nation. He says, and you will get rich. Just like with this, watch the growth of the corruption and the pornography and drugs, the abuse of alcohol, and you name it, all these things that take place. And those are the people, just like in Hollywood now, as they push the envelope, continue to get worse and worse, they get richer and richer. So anyway, that's a long story to tell you about this little story here with marijuana. But these are the things that we need to look at as God's people to see what's actually taking place as we're going down the road. All right, our focus this week, it's on propaganda and media as a weapon. So pretty much everything we're going to deal with now is going to center around the mindset of how a media can actually control and move a nation, because that's what we're in the middle of. All right, let's begin with this article from this writer from the San Diego Union Tribune. Lyles, this is the decline of journalism in America. This is from Dick Lyles, who's a writer and has been a writer for many, many years out west. It says, the news media and the loss of credibility. This is an article in the San Diego Union Tribune. And he says, there can be no doubt that the mainstream traditional media in America is a shamble. Although widely revered during his first half of my life, the glory days of America's fourth estate are over. A major casualty from its demise is integrity in the public square. Years ago, with the newspapers, people would herald from what was called the public square. If you want to build a platform, you simply just got your box, you went to the public square, and you would begin to herald whatever it is you want to say. The integrity of the person who was heralding that was imperative to be understood, that he would be honest. Well, that's the way the news media is supposed to be. But those days, according to this article, and as we know, are long gone. So what happens to a nation? What happens to a nation when it no longer can depend on its news media to give them true stories of what's going on in its nation? He says this: once journalists decided to take sides politically, and that's where we're at now. You can't hardly turn on a television and watch a news story anywhere without getting pundits telling you what the news is. They don't give you the news anymore. They tell you what they think you're supposed to hear about what's going on. 9 times out of 10, maybe even 99 times out of 100, it's an attack on the other side in the news that they're giving. So now he says this: once journalists decided to take sides politically, it became an unreachable ideal for them to maintain the level of respect needed to be seen as either credible or influential. Those days are long gone. It is sad, he said, to watch reporters and commentators demand respect after having cast aside objectivity and integrity. So, the decline in journalism, let me show you this. I'm going to bring you up a chart in just a few minutes. It says, these are the only traits, the integrity that he was talking about. These are the only traits through which they might earn the respect that they were taught in journalism school that the media deserves. So if your one area of credibility is thrown out the window, why would anyone trust you again? So what are we witnessing? What is actually taking place here? It says, watching journalists demand respect today is like watching a thief who robbed a bank demand to be treated like an honest person for admitting his crime. I thought that was pretty good. In other words, hey, I told you I'm a thief, so now give me my respect. So anyway, that's what's going on in the news media. We see it that there is no confidence in the news media across the nation. It says few have a lot of confidence in information from professional news outlets or friends or family, though majority show at least some trust in both. So now what that's telling you, and I'm going to show you some charts, is that nobody really believes them, but there is some credibility that they will give them. It says only about 2 in 10 Americans, or 22%, trust the information they get from the local news organization. That's pretty horrible. But all the money and the time that's spent in the news, 2 out of 10, 22%. So now, they don't believe a whole lot, it says. Now, this is a chart. Here's the way it breaks down. So let me I'll tell you what you got here. Local news, do you believe a lot in the news that you hear? That's the way the question was asked. Do you believe in a lot or some? 22% said I believe a lot of what's being told to me. 60% said, well, I can believe some of it. In other words, there's a little bit of truth in what they're telling me, is what basically that they're telling you. All right, the national news. All right, the national news, 18%. All right, so 18% say, yeah, I can believe it. 59% say, well, I might believe in some of it. So that's what you're looking at when you hear the news. Only 4% of web-using adults have a lot of trust in the information they find on the social media. That rises to about 7% among those who get the news from those sites. So that's the way it breaks down. The only thing I don't have written down here is right here. It's family, friends, and acquaintances. They'll believe about 14%. So even people in your closest circles, they don't trust what they've got to say. So we're in a terrible mess as far as any credibility from almost any source, is what this is telling us here. That was 2 years ago, and it has gotten worse since then. So now, why am I telling you this? Why is this important for you and I, and why am I covering that in God's Unchanging Word? Is because the news shapes opinion. Well, we know that. I mean, I'm not telling you something that people don't know. We've known that for centuries. But what happens when opinion becomes the news? Now, that's where we are today. Now, we have never gotten to this stage where the opinion shapes the news. Or have we? Has there ever been a time? Well, yeah, a lot of countries, before they begin their decline, the news media always begins to move to protect its sources, to protect its power, and that's what's going on right now. It's called propaganda. Now, propaganda is what we're looking at. So when you look at the news media today, if they're not giving you true news, they're giving you propaganda, whether you realize it or not. Again, why is this important in 2018? Is because a nation that operates on opinion rather than real news is no longer a free society. So that's what you're seeing. Why are we looking at news? Why are we looking at when people stand on public sidewalks now and express an opinion they're being assaulted and nobody says anything? Why is it okay to be able to tell people you need to get in other people's faces? Because that's the propaganda that promotes what they're trying to bring about in their agenda for power and control. So now, it's no longer a free society. It's a people who've become pawns to those who control the media. That's what we're looking at. But when there is no system of justice and the media begins to control the people and it can do what it wants to, you're at the very stages of anarchy and the decline of a nation. So now, Its future is in the hands of the money who controls the propaganda. That's what you're looking at, and that's where we are today. Is bottom line always gets to, if you want to find out what's going on, you always follow the money. That's where the power and that's where the control continues to come in. I will add one more thing to that. Follow the Spirit. You will find the Spirit who's generally controlling the money, and you will also find another area that we're talking about here on God's Unchanging Word. Now, let's bring this, what I just told you about controlling the media, controlling the power, controlling the money, into pre-World War II state in Germany, and see if this does not sound like the media that we have today here in America today. Germany, World War II propaganda. The Nazis effectively used propaganda to win the support of millions of Germans in a democracy and later a dictatorship to facilitate persecution, war, and ultimately genocide. Now, this picture that I'm showing you, this was a newspaper that was blown up and it was put around the cities in Germany. It was an outdoor display of anti-Semitic newspaper in 1935. Pre-World War II. What were they doing? They were using propaganda to shape the mindset of the people in Germany. How do you go from a nation that loved and revered a people, the Jews, who had businesses and who had support in those countries, to all of a sudden the same people, same country, hate those people, despise them, and want to get rid of them? It was through the propaganda war machine that Germany used. Why am I telling you this again? I'm answering that question now. This is the question I asked twice before. It's because at the end time, the anger of Satan is going to rile itself up to the point that the people, just like here, and I'm going to show you more of this as we go through this now, is the people now who continue to want to bring about their own agenda of the abortion, the gay rights, and all the other things that are anti-God, will go after those who are God, claiming they're godly and destroying those who are not. Just like you're looking at right here. Can't happen in America? Well, I'm here to tell you something. It will happen in America. It's happened before in a limited extent. It will happen again at a greater extent. So going on. The stereotypes and the images found in Nazi propaganda were not new, but they were already familiar to their intended audience. So now, here's a picture. This is out of the Holocaust Encyclopedia. This was at the Holocaust Museum. I believe it's in America, the United States Holocaust Museum. This was a propaganda poster that was put out in Germany. So it's Nazi anti-Jewish propaganda, often portrayed Jews as engaged in a conspiracy to provoke war. Is that not what we're hearing today? This administration, he's just out to provoke war. Those who support him, they're out to provoke war. So what you have is the three states, and then you have the Jews behind it. In other words, all the problems that we're having in Germany, they were saying, is because of the Jews. At the end time, climate change. Why did I bring on climate change earlier? It's because at the end time, when you see God bringing about penalties for disobedience. You know, when you look at one of the seals, when God opens up that seal, think about this now. When God opens up that seal and he says the sun is going to have fervent heat, that's going to begin to cause drying up around the country and drought. And a lot of people are going to suffer from that. And they're going to say, this is climate change. And God's people are going to say, no, this is disobedience. What are they looking at? Look here, right here. It's those people, them Jews, these Christians who is bringing about all these problems on our nation, and they have to go. We get rid of them, we get rid of our problems. Can you see the connection? You're in the beginning stages of what's going to be taking place down the road. So what God says, he'll do nothing unless he reveal his secret unto his servants, the prophets. All right, that's God's people. What are we looking at? We're looking at right now, when you turn on the news, when you see the riots that go on, the mobs, can't even use the term mob anymore. When you see all this taking place and the rest of society standing aside and letting it happen, just like here in Germany, you're beginning to see the foundations of what we're going to see down the road when God decides to pull the plug. So let's go on. Here, now back to this poster. So here, a stereotyped Jew conspires behind the scenes to control the Allied powers represented by the British, the American, and the Soviet flags. The caption reads, "Behind the enemy powers, the Jew." In other words, it's them Jews. They're the ones who are creating all the problems. And if you say this enough, people begin to believe it. They honestly begin to believe it in their mindset. How does that work? So how does that work? Now, we can understand by what's going to happen by what went before. So God says, if you want to know what I'm going to do, go look at what I did. He also allows us to understand that human nature doesn't change. So what worked before will work again. Let me show you. The Nazis were skilled propagandists who used sophisticated advertising techniques and used the most current technology of the time to spread their messages. Is that not what we're seeing today? Through Twitter, through Facebook. Just this morning on my way over here, I heard Glenn Beck talk about this, which I never heard before. He said 574 independent people and companies were silenced off of Twitter in 1 week, last week. 1 week, 574 people and businesses. And approximately, you ready for this? 60 million of their followers no longer receive that information. Now, not a word's been said. That's the first I've heard of it. And I'm sure we can go on, you can check it out with him and find out. I'm pretty sure he's accurate in what he's saying there to be able to put it out. That means that those on the other side, the propaganda side, saying, we don't like what you're saying, you're silenced. You're cut off. That's what you're seeing just right now. 60 million people of those 574 people or services now cut off to be able to hear those people. 60 million. And not a word's being said about it. There's a propaganda machine that's growing. It's being funded, and it's beginning to take over many people's lives. All right? Following the Nazi seizure of power in 1933, Hitler established a Reich Ministry of Public Enlightenment, he called it. Isn't that amazing? Public Enlightenment and Propaganda, headed by Joseph Goebbels. Now, we know, looking back, Goebbels. I mean, this was not good news for anybody. The second phase. Once in power, Adolf Hitler created a ministry of public enlightenment and propaganda to shape German and public opinion and behavior. Wow. Now, let's carry this a little bit further. Right now, God has given us a respite. They give a little bit of a time. Through the election, people say, whether you like Donald Trump or you don't like Donald Trump, it doesn't matter. What I'm telling you, this war is a spiritual war. What God has done for you and I, God's people, is given us time to be able to claim a warning. When this protection is gone, when this administration, the protection goes out, once in power, the next power that's going to come in that has so much anger and venom and hatred being built up right now, that when this power gets control, you're going to begin to see an unleashing of anger that we've never witnessed in modern times. It's going to make the 60s look like it's child's play from what's coming. That's the second phase. That is what is coming. Now, I don't know if it'll happen November or not. I have no idea. I think we're going to have more time because we as a church have not really, I don't think we've done our job effectively in the world and more than nations. That may be why God's going to send the two witnesses. Okay. All right, let's talk about the second phase now. Once in power, Adolf Hitler created a ministry of public enlightenment and propaganda to shape German public opinion and behavior. This is absolutely critical. This is absolutely critical. Right now, with the administration that was put in place, God has given us a respite to be able to have some protection to continue to believe and to preach what we're believing. But there's such an incredible hatred that's growing from the other side, all right, from the liberal side, who doesn't want anything to do with God or the Constitution, the freedom and the protection God's given us. Once that power changes, we're going to witness an unleashing of anger that we haven't seen in modern times. It will build slowly, but it will build continually until they have accomplished their agenda. What is that? That moves on to a third phase. So now, The ministry's aim was to ensure that the Nazi message was successfully communicated. That's what you're looking at right now. Is you're seeing tons of millions and tens of millions and even billions of dollars now just actually being poured in this country and around the world to ensure that the message gets out to everyone that what they're saying, it will be accomplished at the peril of anyone who disagrees with them. We're seeing it through the acceptance of abuse in the streets against people, where the government entity of the power of the time is just stepping back and letting them, I'm going to show you that in just a few minutes, letting people do whatever it is they want to do to get their message across. Through art, through music, through theater, through films, through books, radio, educational materials, and the press. We're looking at why is the left controlling schools, education, music? Well, that's because that's the way they control and influence an entire society. So this is the climate you're in today, whether you like to admit it or not. You're in the exact climate of the times of pre-World War II. The liberal controlling the media against the conservative Christian and the laws based upon biblical principles. You are there today. Now, am I exaggerating? Absolutely not. I think I'm being a little conservative here, even expressing the way I'm expressing it. Part 3, the third phase. The Nazi propaganda played an integral role in advancing the persecution and ultimately the destruction of Europe's Jews. It incited hatred and fostered a climate of indifference to their fate. That is the coming of this country and what's going to happen to the conservative Christian and God's people before the return of Jesus Christ. And Jesus says it's going to become so bad that he's going to have to come back and rescue his people one more time. We're in, and I don't know how to express this any more sincere than I've been doing it, and especially in the new series we're doing, that America Under Siege, is to try to get God's people to realize that these are not games that are going on right now. These are real times that the Bible said thousands of years ago they're going to happen, and you're living in them right now. And you need to take this stuff serious, because I don't know how much more time God's going to give us. It could go on, it could settle down, but it doesn't look like it this time. So when you get to this third phase, when we see the government power change again, and there's no longer a fight to protect the Constitution or Christians, but all of a sudden being turned over like the mob that you're seeing out in Portland and out west and in other parts of the country, you're going to see this hatred just absolutely grow. It's going to be horrendous. Now, we talked about this earlier in the year. I talked about this with the news media and the propaganda just a few minutes ago when we brought up the question. So now what I want to do here is I'm going to show you something, how God's been leading our program to be able to be on the cutting edge of all this information that hopefully that you will take serious. Now this is what we said was coming, just like we did last week in our very first program we played last year, what we said was going to come. Now I want to take a moment here, it's only a 6-minute clip of a program that we brought out on March 9th and talking about where we're going and the assault on God's people, talking about education and media, how they're leading the edge, which is leading to the third phase, just like they did in Hitler. So y'all ready? Let's play that clip now. But before we get those, let's get to this one, which is very important, the Oscars, the much awaited for movie. What do you call it anymore? It isn't an awards program. Now it's become the stance and a platform for everyone who seems to hate what the right and the conservative Christians stand for. This is very important. I know I was laughing about it because it's absolutely a joke when you begin to see all these things. But something again has happened at this awards ceremony that I want to bring to your attention and bring out a little bit of a nugget. Best Picture of the Year. In case you haven't heard, Best Picture of the Year goes to The Shape of Water. I really don't go to the movies anymore. I did go to see a couple of them this past year. But I had no idea what this was. And actually I was watching the Governor Huckabee show to see how he was reacting to something that took place with him, which we'll tell you about in just a moment. And on his program, he had a critic, as a movie critic, who actually has 55 million subscribers to his program, and he was asking a question that he did not even know if it was allowed to say on the Governor Huckabee program. Hollywood wants to tell you it is a love story. It's a love story between a human being and a fish. And it's all warm and exciting, but the truth is, it goes much deeper than that. This is a website that I found a headline on. It says, Oscar win. The Shape of Water reveals the soul of Hollywood, bestiality. And this is what the critic on the Governor Huckabee was saying. He says, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this or not. He said, but the movie, he was telling about what the movies are in case anybody wanted to look. He said the movie basically centers around bestiality. And actually I was stunned. It took me back when I heard that because I said, wow. I had no idea what was going on. So now this is on the headline from this website. It says the creature is not only humanized, it is deified with messianic identity and then resurrects Elijah through rapid evolution into a water-breathing person. And I got that from the Gottawa website. It actually goes into some of the points, and it goes into a lot more of the story. So now I'm looking at this. I said, wow, what are we looking at here? All right, so as I was going through this, let me bring you the nuggets now of what we're looking at so that you need to be aware, because listen, this transfers all the way down to our children. I went and looked at it online. It's got an R rating for nudity, for language, and for, well, I don't know how to say anything else, but sexual situations between a fish and a human being. So now, is it really an award for the best picture? Or is it a gateway picture to where Hollywood is taking America next? Now, let me give you the comment, and the reason I'm asking this today is this. This is a comment from a recipient who won an award. I don't even know who she was, but she said, we're the ones who are defining the future. We're setting the path. This is what she said. The envelope that Hollywood pushes today becomes the norm tomorrow. And I sat back, and I've got to tell you something. I didn't watch the whole program. You just can't do it. But I did filter through it back and forth just to see what was going on, hoping that the Winston Churchill movie would, just give you a little insight. I was hoping that the Winston Churchill movie would actually win, because it was one of the few with strong historical documentation of our heritage and where we come from over the years. But when I went and looked at this, you can trace back Hollywood from its changes in the 60s, how it introduces going through the gay rights, goes through the abortion, and it brings things in a very humanistic way and makes people feel warm and fuzzy about the evil that it brings. So now, just a few years ago, as we opened the door for the homosexual marriage, almost immediately it went into gender change. And so now, Hollywood again has found a way to push the envelope to bring in bestiality into our society. Now, if you go look online and you type it in, and you will find that this is going on more and more and more and being pushed upon our society, and you're not supposed to say anything because you're too judgmental if you do. Now, what does the Bible say about this? Then this is just paraphrase, because I just didn't want to get into all of it because it's a little graphic, and I don't know, hopefully we have some children watching, but here's what God says. It says, man and woman shall not lie with the beast, that's an abomination. That's a paraphrased version. Now, we know that, and we've heard that. Now, there is another version, another verse in the scripture that says this in Leviticus 20:15. A person who does that shall be put to death. Do you see how strong God's word is against this type of nature? Right? It is totally against everything that God has devised of the marriage between a man and a woman, and that relationship which defines the marriage between Jesus Christ and his bride coming back, and the Father who lives in heaven, that all of this is going to take place. This type of thing now, you're going to see more and more, because as that person said, the envelope now has been pushed. And not only has it been pushed, but it was given 13 Academy Award nominations, and it won 4, including Best Picture. This is absolutely horrendous. So I wanted you to be aware, because if you're like me, you haven't been paying much attention to what's going on in the movies, but our children are, and so is the society. And this is just one more push of the envelope that brings our nation back down to the debauchery and the slide into the moral abyss that we face every single day. But there you have it. We brought that back out in March. So now let's go right here again, one more time. The Nazi message was to successfully communicate through art, music, theater, films, books, radio, education materials, and the press. In other words, the propaganda machine controlled everything that came to people's minds. Eventually, they bought up or they tore down anyone and anybody who opposed the propaganda war machine. They destroyed them. Newspapers, radio. Eventually, they even bought radios. They bought like 75 million radios and gave to people in Germany and across Europe that could only get the Nazi propaganda war machine on those radios, so that the people wouldn't listen to or hear anything else except for what they had to say. So it's amazing what's been taking place and where we are today. So now, let's talk about it now in another context. We're going to talk about now our nation as we're going from tolerance to acceptance to promotion of civil disobedience. Now, I'm just going to give you just the foundation here because this is an area that we want to cover. I don't know if we'll get to it next program, but we're going to get to it very soon, talking about God and when He warns us that we're going to be a nation who disobey laws. All right, there was just the civil unrest. Here recently, what we're watching is Portland. The Portland Antifa protesters caught on video bullying an elderly motorist and a woman in a wheelchair. You have probably seen this many times over now in the news, so I don't have to go back into the video. I actually tried to bring the video in, but I couldn't get a video that was good enough and clear enough that it wasn't bringing in just political points of view. My point of bringing in is the civil disobedience for God's law is what we're trying to bring out. So when we seen that, what happened? The Portland mayor was standing by his decision to allow Antifa to block traffic and hassle motorists. Now, this is pretty serious. In other words, you see all this going on, the government, the police stand back and allow it to take place because they're afraid of inciting the protesters and causing more damage or more problems. So as they stand back, they allow citizens to be put in harm's way. Now, we've seen that back about a year or two ago when the mayor, I believe it was Baltimore, when they began to burn down parts of Baltimore after a youth was killed by a policeman. When the mayor said, look, we just got to give them time to get this off their chest, and they just sat back. How far does this go? Is there any stop to this? No, there's no stop to this. So this is what I'm talking about. When you begin to see the power change to allow this kind of thinking that it's okay, it's become acceptable, more people will do it. Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler came under fire again over the viral video showing the Antifa protesters blocking traffic and hassling drivers. But he supports the decision by the police to watch from a distance without getting involved. And I saw those videos, and you probably did, about a block away in the next corner, the police were just letting people come through, and instead of going in and stopping this, they allowed it to continue. And there's the sign, anti-fascist zone. In other words, you come in here, and you risk your own life if you don't agree with us. That's where we are as a nation, that we've actually allowed the bullies, the protesters, the mobs to come in and take over control of city streets without any fear of reprisal. Absolutely unbelievable when you look at it. The German war propaganda again. Let's go finish this up. During the periods preceding legislation or executive measures against the Jews. All right, so this is what happens before the laws are put in place. Daniel 7:25. He shall speak pompous words against the Most High, shall persecute the saints of the Most High, and shall intend to change times and laws, and then the saints will be given into his hands for a time, times, and a half time. Now, we're going into that in our series, America Under Siege, right now. So what I'm doing is I'm taking the war machine propaganda, tying it into America today, where we're going into, and now bringing in the biblical nugget here, showing how God says this is what's going to happen. This is where God's pointing us to and what we need to be aware of. It says propaganda campaigns created an atmosphere tolerant of violence. Now, isn't that what I just showed you? Right? Being tolerant of, it's like, well, we just got to let them get it off their chest. If we interfere, it's only going to get worse. They were tolerant of violence against the Jews, particularly in 1935 before the Nuremberg race laws of September, and in 1938 prior to the barrage of anti-Semitism, which was the economic legislation following Kristallnacht. So in other words, they didn't have laws, so they just used violence and mob brutality, but eventually changed laws and began to be tolerant to the violence. It was okay to harass, to burn down, to beat, and even to kill Jews. Not only was it okay, it became almost law that you had to, and you had to turn them over to the government. So propaganda also encouraged passivity and the acceptance of the impending measures against Jews, as these appeared to depict the Nazi government as stepping in and restoring order. Now, that's what we're beginning to see from the liberal media, that we need to come in and set laws to stop those people who don't agree with what we're doing. Now, that's government steps in to restore order. That's what's going on. I hope you can see the connections. These are not wild. These are not crazy accusations. I'm not pulling something off the wall. I'm giving you facts, I'm giving you prophecy, and I'm giving you current events to tie all this together. You want to know where it's going? Just take a look at what happened before. God says it's going there again. Every one of these things will come to pass, and they're coming to pass quicker than we ever imagined. All right, now I spent a lot of time here. I just want to get this finished up so I can get our program finished. But this is important. This is one of the most important programs we've done to date, because you need to understand the mindset of the evil that's coming upon our society. And it's creeping in ever so fast. It's taking our youth, and they're using these youth as weapons to be able to change this nation. Now, how do they do that? All right, so this was back in February. This should be 2018, not 2018, 2018. More than a dozen businesses ran away from the NRA. Do you remember this? All right, just like the German war propaganda. In the wake of the massacre at Florida High School on February 14th, activists flooded social media with calls to end corporate partnerships with America's most powerful gun lobbies. All right, so now let's draw this connection. I'm taking a little liberal license here of showing a connection. All right, so now after the war, they call that it was a war on our children, is that because there was guns involved, they had to go after the NRA. Like, we can't have anything to do with these, you ready? Jews. See the connection, what I'm talking about. So if you could put your mindset of what happened before. So now they're looking at these are the evil people. These are the people who have guns. They have to be stopped. How do we stop them? Well, we're going to cut off their lifeline. We're going to cut off business and support with them. That is unconstitutional. But it became accepted. All right? That was back a little while ago. Now look at this more recently. Hyatt Motels, to millions of conservatives, you're not welcome at our hotels. Now, this came out from ACT America. So I know ACT of America gets pretty aggressive. So, well, let me take this and prove this out. But literally, this has come out through dozens of other news media that this report is actually true. This came out this month, 10/9. Hyatt Hotel Corporation issued a statement declaring that their company would no longer be hosting hate groups. Hate groups like who? Like ACT America. Like the conservative Christian movement, they're calling those hate groups. All right. Here's the statement that they said. This actually was a statement put out by the CEO of the Hyatt. He says, if a group is primarily focused on disparaging a group by virtue of their identity, that's really where we need to draw the line. So who's a hate group? If you have a problem with someone's identity. How about God's people now? How about God's people? Suppose we're doing a campaign in a city and we're going to bring out our beliefs. One of the beliefs are we do not believe in gay marriage. We do not believe in the homosexual movement. They will look at that as targeting the identity of those people, and we become a hate group. You see where this is going, all right? That's really where we need to draw the line, he says. We're going to apply our values to making these decisions along the way. Their values are changing. It changes with public opinion, and they will go where the money takes them. And that money is taking them where we start with this with? The propaganda that makes the movement. You see the connection, how it all falls together. It's not complicated. The statement was made following a well-coordinated, Soros-funded smear campaign by groups such as the Muslim Advocates, the MoveOn.org, the Council on American-Islamic Relations, and the Southern Poverty Law Center. We talked about them not too long ago, the Southern Poverty Law Center, targeting their hotel chain for hosting ACT for America's National Conference at the Hyatt Regency in Crystal City Hotel. Look what it says in Revelation 13, verse 16 and 17. Talking about the rise of the beast, and we begin to wrap this segment up. It says, you'll not be able to buy or sell. Now, I've wondered about that, how do you not be able to buy and sell? You have to have the mark of the beast. And lots of times we think that simply involves the Sabbath. Well, a lot of these businesses now, like the NRA and people who do business with them, they're not going to be able to buy or sell. Nobody's going to sell them time. Nobody's going to give them opportunity to be able to do things. In verse 16 it says, he causes both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive the mark on their right hand and on their foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. So these are the foundations for eventually what's going to come to when that beast rises up. You're seeing how these things will come in play and how they'll begin to take over the world that's going to cut out God's people. So anyway, that's why I wanted to bring that segment to you. I know I spent a lot of time in that segment. I really did. But it's imperative. I want to just really step by step, line by line, inch by inch, walk you through how these things take place. Because if you can put your mind in the spiritual realm of what God's showing us, it'll be a lot easier to understand when you see news events where it's coming from, to try to make some sense of it all. Because without God's plan, none of this makes any sense at all. All right, when we come back, we're gonna go into our segment called Lying Witnesses. But in the meantime, let's take a break from all this serious stuff, and let's take a look at this video called Fruit of the Spirit. It's about 3 minutes long, and I'll be right back. welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that little video, our way of just giving you a little bit of inspiration. So now let's get into our nuggets portion of the program today. We're going to talk about lying witnesses and to talk about what God says, because God lays down some pretty harsh penalties for lying witness. And just imagine if we lived into a nation that will live by some of the laws and the principles that I'm about to show you. All right, the lying witness. All right, let's talk about that now. In Exodus 23, verses 1 and 2. You shall not raise a false report. Put not your hand to the wicked to be an unrighteous witness. You shall not follow a multitude to do evil, and neither shall you speak in a cause to decline after many to the rest the judgment. In other words, you don't come as a lying witness, and you don't join the mob to be able to support a person's opinion. Right? This is the warning that God says you just don't do it. Right, so going on. Deuteronomy 19:15. It says, one witness shall not rise up against a man for any iniquity or for any sin, in any sin that he sins. At the mouth of two witnesses or at the mouth of three witnesses shall the matter be established. Now, you can't just believe one person. There is a movement afoot in America that right now it's in this one small area, but if a woman declares that she has been abused, it's incumbent upon America to actually have to believe her, whether it's true or not. Absolutely, whether it's true or not. That's the law. That's in public opinion right now. That's the propaganda that's being shed. Deuteronomy 19, verses 16 through 21 is where the United States developed its justice system. If you ever wonder where we got our justice system, it's out of Deuteronomy 16 through 21. It says verse 16. If a false witness rise up against any man to testify against him that which is wrong, then both the men between whom the controversy is. All right, so here's what it's saying. If somebody says, you did me wrong, and the other person said, no, I didn't, so this is what they were supposed to do. It's all right, so here's the controversy. They shall stand before the Lord and before the priest and the judge, which shall be in those days. And the judges shall make diligent inquisition, and behold, if the witness be a false witness, and he that testifies falsely against his brother, what happens when he testifies against his brother? Then shall you do to him as though he had thought to have done to his brother, and so shall you put away evil from among you. So, if the person was accused of a crime that would bring a death penalty, the person who falsely accused was supposed to be given the same result, and that person would be put to death. Now just imagine in America, just imagine today, if we lived by this principle. Just imagine if the news media was held accountable for what it said. If it lied, it was a lying witness, then they would be held accountable for it, and justice would be given accordingly. Just imagine what this nation would be like if we did that. All right, the lying witness penalties. We just went through that in 16. Now look at verse 20. Deuteronomy 19, verse 16 through 21. Now I want to pick up in verse 20. And those which shall remain and fear and shall be henceforth commit no more any such evil from among you. If this nation did that, if there was a court and they found out that this person was lying, and that's been going on immensely in Congress and in the Senate and in the newspaper and in public opinion. Just imagine if finally somebody says, okay, you just brought about a lie, and they pay a penalty for it. Maybe they spent many years in prison for it, or they had to shut down their businesses, take the fines, and pay off the person that they did that to. But God's saying you'd stop this right off the bat if you would actually live by these laws. But this nation will not do. In fact, it rewards those who brings these things out. It says, and your eye shall not pity. This is amazing. Your eye shall not pity, but life shall go after life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. That was the law that God gave in Israel. Just imagine if anyone ever did some of that today. You'd be putting away a lot of evil out of this country. Proverbs says this. This is the lying witness penalties. Proverbs 14, verse 5 and 12. A faithful witness will not lie, but a false witness will utter lies. All right? A false witness will utter lie. Verse 12. There's a way that seems right unto a man, but the end thereof are the ways of death. In other words, we can devise another system, but if we don't live by that principle of what I just read in Deuteronomy, it won't work. All right? There's a way that seems right, but the ends thereof is death. And that's where we're moving to in our nation today. All right? Proverbs 19, verses 5 and 9. Verse 5. A false witness shall not be unpunished. How do you like that? Shall not be unpunished. In other words, you can't let that man get away with lying. You have to punish the man for lying. And he that speaks lies shall not escape. This was critical for the nation to have stability, for you able to believe anything that's being said. You have to punish the lying witness. But they don't do that today. He can't escape. And that's why nobody believes the news media and what's going on, because people can say and do anything they want to with no fear of any reprisals for what they've done. Verse 9, a false witness shall not be unpunished, and he that speaks lies shall perish. Like if he's coming in and he's lying, put him to death. Get rid of this guy. He shall perish. This is pretty serious penalties, showing you how serious it is to a nation to have the credibility of being able to have an honest court system going forward. All right. Just got a couple more, I believe. With King David, Psalm 27, verse 12. Look what David says. Deliver me not unto the will of mine enemies, for false witnesses are risen up against me, and such as breathe out cruelty. So now, David knew what it was like to feel what was coming against him. What about dishonest judges? The Bible talks about the dishonest judges in Isaiah 1, 22 through 26. He says, your silver become dross, your wine mixed with water. Your princes are rebellious and the companions of thieves. Everyone loves gifts and follows after rewards. They judge not the fatherless, neither do they cause the widows to come to them. Therefore, says the Lord of hosts, the mighty one of Israel, I will ease me of my adversaries, and I will avenge my enemies. And I will turn my hand upon you and purge away your dross and take away all your sin, God says, and all your sin, and I will restore your judges. It almost looks like that he just turned everything around in everything he said in these previous verses here. So what is God saying here in Isaiah? And I will restore your judges. In other words, all of this corruption was allowed. Why? Because the judicial system had become corrupt. They took money, they took bribes, they favored the wealthy and the more important. They allowed people to lie in court and take people's businesses and their homes and put people to death. God says, well, I'm going to get rid of all of that. How does he start? He says, I will restore your judges. When God comes back, he says, do you not know that you're going to judge angels? God's people are going to be in a position to judge with righteous judgment when Jesus Christ returns. With righteous judgment. One of the first things God does if he wants to put a nation back in place, he restores the judicial system back to its integrity. What is the battle we're seeing going on in Washington right now? It's the battle to put judges in the courts that will judge according to the constitutional foundation, not just the Supreme Court, but in judges across the nation. Because our nation is in shambles. It's not being judged righteously anymore because those who don't even know the difference between right and wrong are calling wrong right and right wrong. So that's what we're seeing right now. So now let me finish this verse. I will restore your judges as at the first, and your counselors as at the beginning, and afterwards they shall be called the city of righteousness, the faithful city. So if we want to get things straight, you got to judge. You got to put the judges back to the righteous way to be able to judge things. Look at here in 1st, 2nd Chronicles 19, verse 6. He said to the judges, consider what you are doing, for you do not judge for man, but for the Lord who is with you when you render judgment. Just imagine that today. Can you imagine if the judges who sit in the judicial system today would honestly sit there and say, listen, The decisions I make, they have to be honorable before God because my decisions goes before the throne of God. Deuteronomy 16 verse 19 says, "You shall not distort justice. You shall not be partial, and you shall not take a bribe. For a bribe blinds the eyes of the wise and perverts the words of the righteous." Eventually, that's what brought Christ down, when they paid witnesses to go lie against him. And even the witnesses couldn't even get the story straight. But the Bible talks a lot about the justice system in a nation. Exodus 23 verse 8, "You shall not take a bribe, for the bribe blinds the clear-sighted and subverts the cause of the just." So we're living in a society now where you begin to wonder what in the world has happened to righteousness that cries out in the streets. When God comes back, you're going to be a part of restoring the righteous judgment and putting a nation back to where it belongs, coming in. All right, the honest judges, we're just about wrapping this up now, is Deuteronomy 1, verse 16 and 17 says, "I charge your judges at the time, saying, hear the cause between your brother, and judge righteously between every man and his brother, and the stranger is that which within him. You shall not respect persons in judgment. You shall hear the small as well as the great. You shall not be afraid of the face of the man, for the judgment is God's. And the cause that is too hard for you, bring it to me, and I will hear it." This is what Moses is talking about to the people, and said, bring it to him, and he would bring it to God as they went forward. So that's where we are today. You know, we're in a system where our nation is falling apart. Propaganda is taking over. People are lying in the streets. People are going to jail for falsehoods. And our nation is in absolute shambles. And it will not get better until it repents. All right, well, that's our program for today. Let's wrap up. Now, from the home office, we got a couple things here to bring to you. In the mail, I think that one, is that this week? This was last week. I should have took this one out. This was Clayton Evans, the Should We, what did it say? Should We Wait for God? All right, so it was a good little sermon that Clayton delivered right here in New Orleans. In the mail this week, DVDs mailed out. A sermon by Chuck Hunt called The Right Mindset. And on the same DVD, the sermonette by his brother Josh Hunt, says, In the Eye of the Beholder. Then a sermon that I delivered right here in New Orleans, In the Spirit of Excellence, talking about Daniel 6 in verse 3. So those DVDs are mailed out. If you're not on the mailing list, get on the mailing list, and you can get these DVDs coming to you. We send out a card every single month. On the road, I'm going to be on the road considerable amount of time this coming year as I'm able to get out of here, is that we will be in Flemington, New Jersey on November 3rd. That's just a couple weeks. Mark Rusinko is doing a follow-up of a music Sabbath, special worship Sabbath with Brother coming up in the surrounding states. They're going to have a potluck meal to follow through this. It's at the Hampton Inn in Flemington, New Jersey. If you need more information, you can give Mark a call at 609-508-0572. And you see the email address, rusinkomark@aol.com. They're expecting quite a few people coming in from, I think, 3 or 4 states to participate in this special Sabbath. So if you're anywhere in the area, come on by. We'd love to have you. Also, we're looking at other locations for this coming year, November 17th. These are in the works. I can't guarantee, but I just want to mention to you. In Milwaukee, Wisconsin, tentatively November 17th, we'll be up there with a brand new group who've asked us to come up, and I'll be meeting with Steve Council, hopefully, to get us together to go up there November 17th. And then in Rhode Island, Massachusetts area, December 1st. Mo and Jean Dion from Rhode Island have been connecting with several groups now, new groups with us to fellowship and to work with up in that area, and they're trying to get something set up for December 1st. So please put it in your prayers for the safety and for the weather and travel, because getting into these areas in the wintertime gets a little tough sometimes. So anyway, that's just a couple of them. We've got a lot more we're going to announce as the year goes on. All right, so now let's begin to wrap up our program. And there's our little pooches having a great time. They're back in school. So the video today, our final video we're going to be talking about now to show you before we close, a little inspirational video. It is entitled Mirror. Looking into a mirror. Let's play that mirror, and we'll be right back to close our program.
When you look in a mirror, what do you see? Do you see freckles? Maybe a set of braces? A gap in your teeth or a big pointy nose? The Bible says that we are all created in God's image. Of all the images on earth, whether it be a waterfall, a beautiful sunset, a cute little puppy dog or a nice shiny car, above all these images, human beings are created as the pinnacle of creation, the cherry on top. Above all these images, the closest we can find to seeing God in all of God's glory is the human form. You are an icon, a representation of God. The Bible says that we are meant to reflect God like that of an image in a mirror. Do you have a face that shines? Do you have a face that when people see it, they feel encouraged, uplifted, happy? The truth is that many young people think about themselves in a negative way. Many young people don't feel like they're good enough. They wish they looked like someone else, the popular people. But the truth is, you are perfect exactly the way you are. No one can change the fact that you are a gift from God, sent to glorify God here on earth. So I want to encourage you, next time you look in a mirror, remind yourself that it's the face of God that looks back at you.
Well, that's it for our program today. Thank you for watching, and as always, we ask you, please help us to get this word out, especially this program. A lot of information here that's going to affect people's lives because the news and events and prophetic fulfillment is taking place every single day in our lives. Well, that's it from all of us at God's Unchanging Word. Thanks again for watching. Have a great week. Until next time, God be with you.